Welcome to the October 2016 Open edX remote meetup. As always, it's we got the open source team from edX. We got Ned, Shauna, and George, myself. And we also have guests from Montreal today you'll get to meet a little later. So let's just kind of run through a little bit of what remote meetups are about. It's we're aiming to hold it monthly. The next one will be a little bit different since November and December are kind of short months, and we'll announce kind of when that's going to be. And next month it's going to be between 10 and 11 a.m. I believe Eastern. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and we'll have the usual recurring features, and we'll announce kind of what the next feature topic is going to be. But for this month, it's going to be Shauna talking about. Whoops, I forgot to update that, but it's large contributions. So it's still relevant. It's improving the contribution process. So with that, let's go into community updates. So this is a segment that we kind of talk about what, as the open source team, you know, stuff that we're.
Can I just interject something?
Sure.
So for people, if you're watching, we have a Slack channel set up
Right.
in the OpenEdX Slack team. This channel is called Remote Meetup, and if you have questions, Hangouts on Air doesn't give you the opportunity to speak back to us. But if you have questions, you can type them in the Slack channel, and we'll try to leave a little gap so that people can jump in with questions. But even if we are on to the next topic, feel free to ask questions, and we're monitoring the channel, and we'll discuss what comes up.
Yeah, there's a slight delay from us talking live versus when you actually see it. So don't feel like we've kind of moved on. Feel free to post questions, and we'll circle back to it. So community update is kind of about what the open source team within edX have been working on this past month. You know, we've been working on more stuff than this, but these are kind of the things that we're ready to share with the community. And one of the things that we've done a lot of thinking around and improvements on, and hopefully you'll see that as well, is the whole process around how we manage the lifecycle of OSPRs, the open source pull requests. And what we've done is kind of segmented our internal product teams, and each one of us, Ned, Shauna, and myself, are kind of focused on working with specific product teams to move those pull requests all the way through the lifecycle, kind of shepherding that and keeping on top of it and facilitating communication between contributors and our internal team. And that's, I think, so far worked out really well, because it allows us to form a much tighter relationship with each team, internal team, and then kind of getting to know the different contributors that are working in different parts of the app. So that's worked out well. The other portion right now is we're actively working on getting better visibility, kind of overall between our internal issue tracking system. It's not necessarily internal, but our Jira is largely used by internal edX people, and then GitHub obviously is like the public-facing side of things. We're trying to get a much better way of integrating the two platforms to get visibility overall of kind of where status, you know, where things are, where we need to give a nudge to a contributor or give a nudge to internal product managers or engineers to, you know, to move issues along. And we'll constantly be making improvements on that, and we always welcome feedback from the community in terms of, you know, if we're not providing enough feedback for the enough visibility into the process, then let us know, because it's something that we strive to keep improving on. And then the other big focus is looking forward to Ficus release. starting to plan out what that's going to look like. And I'll let Ned kind of speak a little bit to that, since he's pretty much heading up that effort right now.
Hi. So to answer the first question, we don't have a hard date for Ficus. We are aiming to get it out. Ideally, it would be in December, but I don't want to make a hard promise like that because I know these things can get difficult. There are two things we're doing technically with Ficus that are going to introduce specific risk to us getting it out the door. The first is that we are going to be moving from Ubuntu 12 to Ubuntu 16. So Ubuntu 12 is a long-term support release that is finally going out of support in April 2017. And since we expect the Ficus release to be running well beyond that, we want Ficus to be running on Ubuntu 16 before it goes out. So the DevOps team is currently scoping out the work and planning how to get us moved from Ubuntu 12 to Ubuntu 16. The change that we're taking on for Ficus is that we have some separate services within the Open edX world that are currently not installable into a single vagrant image the way we are used to running, for instance, DevStack and FullStack. And rather than continue to try to squeeze everything into that single vagrant image, we're going to be starting to run that vagrant image, but then with other services in Docker images alongside that vagrant image. So we are working on a mixed vagrant for the existing code that currently runs in vagrant plus Docker for new code model. And then also the idea over time being that more and more things can move out of that vagrant image and into their own Docker containers, with the eventual end goal being that the vagrant image no longer has anything running in it and we get to do away with it and we're in an all Docker world. Obviously the big thing to get done to get to that final end state is to move edX platform, the LMS and Studio, into a Docker container. And we are not taking that on for Ficus. What we are trying to do for Ficus is simply to get new software that isn't yet installed as part of Eucalyptus running in Ficus. So those are the two technical things that are happening for Ficus that make it very different than Eucalyptus and make it especially difficult to promise particular dates.
Yeah, and again, we're starting with course discovery API service, and if people have suggestions of kind of high value IDAs or other parts of the edX platform that they'd like to see this happen to, like, help us kind of prioritize what those other add-ons might be.
And we may be putting out a call for people to test particularly new configurations, or maybe give us some advice on tricky Docker things that we're encountering, or Ubuntu 16 things that we're encountering. So if you have a particular interest in helping with that process and you have some spare cycles, we'd love to have your help with that.
Before I move on, so I added an item just a moment ago that I don't think got, I think you just needed to refresh the slides, but anyone who goes to the actual slides can see it added, which is just a quick mention that we've started as of within the past week or so, a theming working group. And within the past 20 minutes, I created a Google group for that theming working group. So if you're interested in theming, and especially if you're interested in being part of the process where we decide how to approach the issues with theming that we've been having, then I encourage you to join the theming working group. Or if you're not sure about whether or not you want to join it, feel free to reach out to me to get a sense of what the working group will actually be working on.
So there's a question in Slack about the Docker. Felipe asks, I think the question is edX going to run production with Docker for the new IDAs? And the answer is no, at least not yet. So the Docker work that we're doing now is really about the 3 supported techniques we have for installing OpenEdX, DevStack, FullStack, and what we call the native installation. we don't have a supported production installation mechanism, and the way that our DevOps team installs and runs production is with the same Ansible playbooks, supported mechanisms, but they are spread out over a number of machines and coordinated in a way that we are not trying to do with the community.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us is going to be making sure that the experience is going to be fairly consistent, whether you spin up a bare metal machine and run the Ansible playbooks, or you decide to use the Docker containers for evaluation and development purposes. We're not aiming necessarily for production right now, but most likely those Docker instances would either have contained those Ansible playbooks played out, or it'll run those Ansible playbooks or one shape, one form or another. So we can make sure that they perform consistently regardless of kind of how you arrive at composing your platform. The other big part is to make sure that the services can be deployed on potentially on separate machines, rather than right now, we just kind of assume everything goes on one machine. So, all right.
Sorry, there's a question about the theming working group. Just quickly to Peter. So the theming working group is likely going to tackle a couple of different things, and it's possible that some of the, I guess you'd call them quick wins, might be addressed in time for Ficus, but I imagine that there will definitely be some stuff that isn't finished in time for Ficus that would be in the next release.
And I mean, I would say that in general, we're not particularly planning around the Ficus release.
Yeah, and for those of you who just heard that voice, that's Joel. He's the manager of the open source group. So he's Ned, Shauna, and my manager. In case you hear kind of that detached voice, he actually knows what he's talking about. All right. So yeah. So regarding with the roadmap and product updates, Ian Kennedy has officially joined. I don't remember when his start date was, but we were kind of introduced to him during our engineering meetup just a couple weeks ago or last week. And so he's going to head up the product group. So he's going to work with all the product managers to kind of figure out what's the roadmap for the platform itself, and not just at edX.org, but also for open source as well. Having said that, since he's so new, he hasn't had a chance to kind of absorb all that information and come up with a roadmap yet. His goal, I believe, is to essentially have like the next 3 months at some level of detail of kind of what's coming down the pike, and then 3 months after that is sort of at a higher level planning. So so we'll be keenly kind of following up with him, and as soon as we have some information, we'll definitely share that out. But we also want to give him the opportunity to be able to kind of absorb the information and figure out how he wants to approach this very big and and thorny issue, which I know everyone is keen on knowing what's going on, including us. But in the meantime, there's our doc team does post regular updates. I know it's a little bit after the fact, but they do summarize really well sort of what features are in the product each month. And the best place to check that is at the portal announcements, which is a link on the slide. And then specifically, there's a link to what's announced in October. And I know the November one is being prepared right now, so that should go out pretty shortly. So yeah, so as soon as we have more updates on the roadmap, we'll definitely let you know. So with that, we have our community spotlight. So all the way from Montreal is Robert and Pierre, and I'll let them kind of introduce themselves.
I'm Robert Gérard-Lajoie. I'm the edLib coordinator from almost 3 years now.
And I'm Pierre Mayotte. I'm the MOOC system administrator. I'm here since September 2014.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about, how long have you used the Open edX platform, and kind of a little bit of history of how you came about choosing it.
Well, I was brought in to the university in September 2004 to help install the Open edX platform for the edLib project. You have to understand that edLib had a previous life run by one of our business school, the École des Hautes Études Commerciales, who was running a Sakai instance at the time. But we decided, as part of the community of the Université de Montréal, to create a MOOC website based on Open edX, which was one of the software that wasn't used by any of the Université de Montréal, École des Hautes Études Commerciales, our business school, and École Polytechnique de Montréal, our engineering school. So the choice was made to use Open edX and host it in Amazon Web Services. So like I said, I came in September 2014. I had a huge learning curve because I hadn't been a sysadmin for the last 12 years before, and I had to learn Python. I had to learn all of this stuff in Open edX, and also how to install everything in AWS. We launched our first course in February 2015 after migrating all our users from the previous edLib platform under Sakai, and also migrating all or some of the courses that were based on Sakai before, but we kind of migrated them and adapted them for Open edX.
Cool. So far, how's Open edX as the platform been for your use case? And maybe you can talk about, are your use cases pretty normal for a MOOC, or are there any special things that you're doing that you feel like are outside the norm?
Well, we've got a lot of, I would say, standard MOOC. We've got a few, I would say, SPOC or restricted access MOOCs that are used, for example, mostly for, I would say, continuing education for professionals. We've got courses, obviously our courses are in French, and we've got courses in both medical sciences, social networking, engineering, and a lot of business courses.
I will add something. One of our specialty is that we build international MOOC, by that I say, with institution overseas, Belgium institution, the Switzerland institution. And the fact that we share with France Université Numérique, the Open edX platform, enable us to make jointly development between French and Quebec or Canada, and French institution in France or Belgium or Switzerland. And this is a huge advantage of international cooperation. Not only the code is open source, but we share the course development between different international institutions. We have started with one course, almost finished. It would be get out this winter, but we have started a new trend, and here at University of Montreal and all the international cooperation. And this is very, very important. And this is why we chose open edX. We were knowing it will be easy to share course development internationally using open edX.
And we're also recruiting some of the other French universities in the province of Quebec and Canada. As a matter of fact, the University of Sherbrooke will join us very soon with one of their first courses on our platform. And we're also developing English versions of our most popular courses.
That's really awesome. What about your the people who are enrolled in the courses? Are they do you have any insights into where they come from?
Yes, we do use Google Analytics to look at where our students are coming from. I would say that you would have probably something like 40% from Canada, 30% from France, and the rest from all over the French community, be it in the Caribbean or in the Africa.
IC is one of our main outside base.
Mm-hmm.
And another aspect, special purpose, beside of intentional MOOC, and continuous education, we have found a niche where we can sell attestation or certificate for continuous education, which are quite popular. In fact, they are each professional organization have asked their member to to receive professional education all over the years, and we certificate our MOOC certificate are have been enabled, so they can be used as for their continuous education,
right,
recognized by the professional organization. So that's quite a good niche we have dig in.
That's great. And have you found things that you've wanted to do with the Open edX platform that you haven't been able to do?
Yes, of course.
What are a couple of things that are sort of top of mind for you?
Okay, one of the best way of getting outside of Open edX, we have used Twitter tweet meeting. So, we asked all the people to go to tweet and make an open discussion with question and answer. And we have been a tremendous success doing that. And, and this, what happened is, going the question and answer session openly and on Twitter, drive new participant, open up. That's one thing very important. Of course, we have used the Google Hangout as the best way of making question and answer session in the middle of our MOOC, and this have been a very important success, and we call them asymmetrical web conference, because you have a slow pace up channel and video down channel, so that's worked quite well. And of course, we want a better integration between those tools and Open edX. What we are the most in need is a way to know which our participants are using the external platform. We know to have some kind of report or participation status between our Open edX platform and Google Hangout, or and we don't have an easy way to do it. In fact, the simplest way is simply ask them question, a special question that is only appearing in the Google Hangout or in the Twitter session, so we can know that they are participating. Why it's important? Because, of course, the professional association want to know that people are participating when we
For sure.
give them a certificate. So that's the main point.
So it sounds like some potential integration or insight into how people are using social media as an adjunct to their learning experience, 'cause since that's what people are naturally using to communicate anyway. So cool, yeah, that's a really good point. For in terms of contribution back to the Open edX platform, I know Ned, you had a specific thing that you wanted to talk about.
About Robert and Pierre's contributions to the platform?
Yeah.
Pierre's been really great about jumping on the new server releases and testing them. But earlier I was discussing the fact that at a hackathon at one of our Open edX conferences, they brought cans of maple syrup.
And,
so anyone out there that wants to make a good impression, bring sweets in cans.
It was our pleasure, Ned.
And building a community is not only building code, it's building good share, good vibe. And so the reason why our management is proud to be testing and very engaged in the deployment of the version is because it's worth the trouble. Pierre, of course, Pierre and everybody is, deploying the new version rapidly. But because of that, we have the latest and the best. But we receive a lot of community support because we are in the middle of the work. When we something is going, we have a problem or a difficulty with something in the new version. Of course, all the community is listening to us and helping us. That's very important, and it's worth the effort.
And I would say that being on the leading edge, especially on the Open edX platform, helps us, or at least me, answer questions in Slack or in the mailing list, because sometimes people will encounter a problem and it's something that I've already encountered in the past. So I'm able to give them a little bit of pointers to what they can do to solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that. We do see you answering questions, and yeah, we can't possibly know all the different possibilities out there.
The point is, in Montreal, we are a proud supporter of open source platform for education. Like Pierre have explained to you, Sakai, we have been major term contributor to Sakai as a Moodle. We have been major contributor to Moodle, and now we want, as much as we can be contributor to Open edX. But beside of each platform is the philosophy that drive us. The point is, this is really worth the trouble, getting involved and getting testing and exchanging information in the community. This is very worth, and it's very.
I really appreciate it. I know that. For those of you who don't know, by the way, Pierre's nick on Slack is Samba Pete, and you may have gotten help from him in the past. I know that when I put out a release or a point release to a release, it's really difficult to know how to make sure everything works in the way that everyone needs. And Pierre's quick feedback on things is really helpful. The best is when he says, "Oh, something's broken," and I don't see it for 2 hours, but in the meantime, in 2 hours, he's figured out what the problem is and he's fixed it on his end, and I don't have to do anything. That's the best. But even when it's something that I do have to do, it's very useful to have those kinds of reports that give me the feedback to make everything better. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ned.
And you know what? And I explained to my management that because Pierre is well connected to the community, it's not only Pierre that is working for us there. It's a team of 10 of and dozens of people in the back. And you know, it's very important to present this to the management as the best way to receive to have a robust chain of support backing us, because Pierre alone will not be able to make something as big as OpenEDX work. But because he received the support of the community, it's possible, and that's very important.
Yeah, and that's a really, I think, a really powerful message that, you know, we will, as the open source team here, that we will definitely continue to foster that and collaboration along all different fronts, right? Not just co-contribution, but like you're saying, knowledge of deployment, potential suggestions of features, or looking at, like you just said, you know, tighter integration with social media. I think those are all great points. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, that was great.
I have
something. Sorry, go ahead.
I have something to add. Sorry, sure. Rapidly. What area of improvement? Internationalization is the area of improvement, not only on the tech side, you know.
We're talking about, we know that we are helping on the French translations on Transifex, but there are other parts of the code where Unicode is my sworn enemy.
What we will appreciate if we can build a task force led by one of you three to see what can be the best you know, a way to I will say have better internationalization of the code, not only the stream. And I think the France University Numérique people, ADRAC people, Spanish people will really be happy to join the task force, and I think you should be at the leading role, but we can help each, and I think it can be very powerful if we build a task force and an international task force. That's my suggestion.
I know Omar isn't on the call today, but I know that Felipe is, because I saw him ask a question earlier. But I think they would agree that some kind of internationalization task force would be needed.
That would be great. And Omar's not on the call. He said in the general channel he couldn't.
Okay, so that's our the area of improvement and area I think we can contribute, not alone, but with the community.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, and you know, we look forward to your continued participation, and we'll definitely call on your experience and understanding more of your collaboration with other content creators around the world, and definitely, you know, students around the world too. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
So next we have Shauna. She's going to talk about the contribution process and kind of how we can improve that. So I'm going to turn the video over to you, Shauna. So whenever you're ready to share.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. So is it presenting from me now? All right, so can you all see my screen?
I can, yes.
I can, yep.
Great. Just let me know if something's gone wrong with technology here. Great, so this mini section is going to be called focusing on improving the contribution process, and the largest focus is going to be on the significant contribution workflow, but I did want to touch on a couple of other things, so I'll go through them fairly quickly. So the first thing I want to talk about is improving the OSPR process. And George talked about this as well in the community update section. But there's 3 areas of focus I just wanted to briefly touch on. So first, just to give a bit of context, at any given moment, we usually have about 50 to 60 open OSPRs. And we have a board that we use to view them. There's a link in the slide that you can go to just take a look at how we view them. And so in the past, with so many open OSPRs, we've had a tendency to lose track of them, which is, something we're very sorry about and are trying to fix. So one of the main things we want to do is prevent any OSPRs at all from being lost or dropped. And George mentioned that now all OSPRs, as part of the sort of first step triage process, get assigned to either George, Ned, or myself. And there's an OSCM assignee field on a given OSPR. So if you're curious about who your person is, you can go take a look at that, or you can just ask the team and we'll let you know. You should feel free, the community member should feel free at any point to ping us for updates about activity, but you should feel especially free if it's been more than 2 weeks with nothing changing. So even though we're going to be more on top of things going forward, there's still a chance that we might drop something or just go slower than you would prefer. And if you reach out to us and give us a little nudge, we promise we will not hold it against you. And in fact, we'll appreciate that a great deal. The second issue that people have brought up is just a lack of clarity around what's going to happen to their OSPR. So we've talked in the team, among the team, about different ways that we can make this information clearer. And we've tossed around a couple of different ideas. One option would be to have the bot provide that information, moving the information from Jira to GitHub. Another thing would be to have the person who's assigned to the OSPR just make a point of updating regularly with information. Another option would be to try to just increase transparency about how the process works so community members can sort of go in search of that information themselves. And all of these have benefits, and all of these, there's pros and cons to each approach. So I wanted to just bring this up to the community as something that we're talking through. How important is this clarity to you? Which of these potential fixes sounds best to you? Is there a way to increase clarity that we haven't thought of that might be a better solution? So just to touch on that briefly. And then the third element that we're trying to get to is just a quicker turnaround. So we've come up with some timing goals. These are not sort of rules, and it's not across teams. This is just a sort of informal things we're aiming for, which is to get things through product review in 1 week, through awaiting prioritization in 2 weeks, and through engineering review in 1 week. It's really helpful for us if you let us know when an OSPR is a high priority or does have a deadline and needs a quick turnaround, so that we can make sure that it meets these goals or even exceeds them if that's necessary, and so that we can prioritize amongst the different OSPRs that teams are dealing with. So those are the sort of 3 elements that we've been focusing on with improving the OSPR process. But if you have any ideas for how we can do that, or if there's an element of the OSPR process that we're missing, because we only get our own perspective as people who are managing the workflow. We don't get to experience what it's like to submit an OSPR, or when we have in fact done this, but all the internal teams know exactly who we are, and they're like, oh, well, if I don't merge Shauna's OSPR, she's going to come knock on my door and be like, why didn't you merge it? So sadly, our attempts to put ourselves through the process have not quite worked. So getting your feedback about how we can improve the process is really helpful. So that's the section on improving the OSPR process. So I guess I'll take just a few seconds in case there are any questions about this specifically. There should also be time at the end if people are still formulating questions. All right, it doesn't look like there are any questions in the chat, but again, I can respond to anything that happens later on. So moving on to the main focus of this presentation. is the significant contribution workflow. So I've added a couple of links here. One is to the wiki page, which houses the current version of the significant contribution workflow, and that's the sort of permanent home for it. It was originally in a Google Doc just to enable quick editing and notes from people. So you can leave comments on the doc. So feel free to do so. There's also, I've linked to the discussion in edX code about the workflow. So our goals in creating this workflow are to address a few different needs. One is to get edX involved early and to continue our involvement in the process as needed. One of the issues that contributors have sometimes had is sort of not wanting to bother the edX teams or not feeling as though they were able to get the time and overview they needed, and then consequently doing a lot of design on their own and then contributing something and only then having us say, oh, wow, this really doesn't fit with where we're planning to go next, or like how we want things to be developed. So getting edX involved early to surface any potential problems, to help guide design to something that works for everyone, is one of the key reasons why we've developed this workflow. Another reason is to increase transparency and record keeping. You'll see as we go through this process that several steps involve the creation of documents, which would then be added to the wiki, which are then searchable for anyone who's searching on the wiki. And then finally, there's two goals that are a bit in conflict with each other. There's a bit of tension between them. So we want to be able to provide structure, especially for sort of larger cross-organizational groups that want to make contributions but aren't really sure what the steps to making those contributions are. But we also want to keep the process flexible because there's a lot of different teams with different goals that are going through this process, and not every step will be necessary for them. So keeping those things in mind, I'm just going to walk through the workflow as it stands now. And again, keep in mind that this is just sort of I guess it's not the first draft anymore, it's like the second draft, but it's a very new process. So any concerns, critiques, changes, please feel free to raise those, because this is absolutely not the final form. And there may never be a single final form. It might be a living, growing process. So the first step in the workflow is actually like a step 0 or a before you begin, which is just the simple logistics. So the step just establishes who you are and how we can contact you and communicate with you. For cross-organizational teams, for instance, something like the theming working group, this is a bit more of an elaborate step because we're dealing with people who are, potentially across the globe, a number of different people from different organizations. So it shouldn't be too difficult to work out logistics, but it's not like completely straightforward. Pre-existing teams that are, a group of people or even a single person representing a single organization are just going to be able to just fly through this step. So that's totally fine. The next step is the goals document or the goals step. And this defines why you want to make the changes. And this is important for us to have. So we understand your motivations and your use cases. So that we can find the best design, because the design will depend on the motivations and the use cases you have. It also helps the open source team figure out what parts of the platform you might end up touching, so that we can involve the appropriate internal engineering teams as early as possible. So you don't actually have to let edX know that you're working on this goals document. You can sort of finish it and send it to us, and we can be like, oh, yeah, this looks good, or can you clarify this a bit? But you're also very welcome to get in contact with us from the beginning and get our feedback at the goal stage. We just don't need that. It's not required that you get in contact with us before you start. We just think it'd probably be helpful to get our feedback or response to the goals. Step 2 is design. So this is, when you finish the goals document, we'll have a decent sense of which people within edX ought to be looking at your process going and your intentions going forward. And this will very likely involve the product team. There's probably some edge case we can come up with where the product team wouldn't be that involved. But most of the time it's going to involve the product team. And so the product team has done this kind of work in a more informal way with a couple of different groups and teams where you've worked together to just design a sort of high-level architecture. One note about this step is that as part of the design, you might realize that some of the things you're coming up with won't just affect your contribution, they'll affect the entire community. And so we're expecting that when the work of these teams leads to open edX proposals, it'll mostly be found in this phase. And so the product team and the open source team will be keeping an eye out for things that might be open edX proposals. You can also say, oh, this might be a good open edX proposal. Generally speaking, starting the OAP process won't be a barrier to continuing on with the work. The third step is implementation planning. Basically, who's doing what and when, getting into the nitty-gritty of how you actually expect your contribution to be implemented. So this helps set expectations on all sides. And by being specific, it unearths potential problems with implementation before you start. Obviously not all problems, but it should hopefully uncover some of them. We understand that the implementation planning document is a sort of living document that's going to be changed as you actually implement your tasks and maybe change your mind or run into unexpected difficulties. That's totally okay. You don't submit the implementation planning document. You don't put it on the wiki at this point because we imagine it'll still be changing. We also, at this point, look at it, see if the accessibility team needs to look at it, see what documentation needs the implementation will require, and sort of involve those teams at this step. And then finally, you have implementation itself, which will mostly consist of OSPRs, although it might not exclusively. And you can reference the implementation planning document in your OSPRs and keep a list of the OSPRs in the implementation planning document to sort of put them in context, which is helpful for the open source team, because while one person will be your liaison to the team, someone else might be dealing with OSPRs coming in. So being able to know that they're part of a workflow is good. So those are the steps. And then when you're finally done with the implementation planning document will be uploaded for posterity to the wiki as well. So just to review how this has been guided by these goals. So one of the goals was to get us involved early and continue involvement. edX will be involved by the end of the first goals step at the latest, and will likely be heavily involved in the design and perhaps also the implementation planning phases. We don't want our involvement to be a blocker or a barrier. So please give us some feedback if you're finding this involvement is too much. But the goal is to basically try and prevent unneeded work from happening because there wasn't enough feedback from the edX product team and other teams early on. The documenting decisions for reference by the community was another goal. I've created a page on the wiki, the Significant Contribution Index, which has just a basic structure for putting these documents. Again, please feel free to give feedback if you think that this is a confusing structure. And then finally, again, that tension between providing structure and keeping the process flexible. If at any point you feel like either there's too much structure for you or perhaps not enough structure for you, please reach out and let us know. And we can figure out how to solve it for you individually. And that might be, you skipping a step or changing a step. And perhaps also your problems are problems that everyone's having. And so we can change the process itself to adapt to your needs. So yeah, this is the basic process. It has flaws. We're going to find out those flaws as we start using it. So please point them out so that we can make the process better. So I will pause again here to see if there are any questions about the significant contribution workflow.
Yeah, I think Nate had a question kind of going back to the OSPR process. He had asked, why not have the internal teams essentially use the same OSPR process? So I think a couple things. One is, just as Shauna highlighted, that a lot of times, especially for larger feature sets, edX as an organization needs to make a decision of whether or not we are going to support that feature. Whereas usually internal features, they're a little different, right? It's like a product manager has come up with a feature and the teams are implementing that. So I think that's one factor where they kind of diverge quite a bit. And I'm not as versed sort of in the internal review process. So I don't know if Ned, you have something to say about that?
Well, I'll tag along with what you just said, which is basically, to put it in a slightly different way, we are organized as a traditional corporation with sort of top-down control over what the engineers are working on. So, an OSPR comes in, we haven't dictated what work that person's doing or what they're proposing, and the extra OSPR process is there as a way of incorporating that work into the planning process that we've already got going on internally. So the internal needs of how do we have a VP of product who has product managers who decide on the big direction, and then the engineering managers who allocate the resources and get the tasks done, et cetera, that process doesn't exist with the open source contributors, right? Nor would it, right? You think you don't like the OSPR process, wait until we tell you what to do. So the point of the OSPR process is for the three of us, George and Sean and me, to put extra effort into the OSPRs that internal PRs don't get, because the internal PRs have already been, before they even exist, have been given a lot of direction and planning. So the needs are very different on the inside and on the outside. That's why there's a different process.
Right. But that being said, the sort of desire to have edX staff and open source contributors be doing the same things is a really valid and important one. And we're always keeping our eye out for ways in which a lot of times, I don't know if it's the exact right term, but you hear the phrase like dog fooding, because we don't want to be separate from the community in a way where things suffer because we don't know what you're going through. So that's why this is why I constantly ask for feedback. And if you see places where it might make sense for edX people and community people to be going through the exact same process or be using the exact same tools or systems, please feel free to ask about that, because it might be an easy or quick win. In this particular case with the OSPR process, not that quick a win. Be a pretty massive restructuring to do it.
Right, and one of the reasons this team exists, Joel and the three of us, George, Sean, and Ned, one of the reasons we are separate from the other engineering teams, not separate in that, not that separate, but we have the goal of understanding what the community needs and advocating for their needs internally, and putting, when it comes down to it, if need be, putting their needs above the needs of edX.org, the website. And so we're trying really hard to understand what you guys are going through and what we can do to make it better, which is why we focus on improving the OSPR process. And Sean is working on the significant contribution workflow and all of those things. So although the inside and the outside are different, our goal is to make sure that they can work well together.
Yeah. Cool. I don't see any other questions on the significant contribution workflow, so I'm going to go to the last section. But again, feel free to ask the questions and we can get to them when the next section is done. So the last thing is just sort of open questions, things that are on our radar as potential areas for improvement. And so I'm just going to talk about them now as potential so that we can elicit feedback from you about these topics. So for instance, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is this idea of community support. So there's a number of features that the Open edX platform needs that wouldn't be used on edX.org. And part of the problem for our product and engineering teams in accepting those contributions that are purely for Open edX community members and not for, well, edX is part of the Open edX community, but not for edX.org, is that there's no formal system in place for anyone else to provide support for those contributions other than people within edX, which can be a problem, especially for contributions that require entirely different configuration or testing setups that we simply don't have. So then we're kind of just like accepting it on faith and hoping that things won't break. And so having a clearer and more formal process for when a community member wants to put something in Open edX, having them be responsible for supporting it is something that could really help get more community features into edX, because then that wouldn't be a limitation for our product and engineering teams in terms of the amount of support they could provide and their willingness to accept things that they can't even test. So that's an area that I want to start diving into. So if you have opinions, thoughts, want to be involved in this process, please reach out. The other thing, we've talked about this earlier on in the meetup, improving the release process, as well as talking about high priority extension points for the community. So what I mean by this is areas where we can make it easier for individual installations of Open edX to make custom decisions without needing to make changes to the Open edX repo. So like Xblocks is a great example of this. The theming working group will probably touch on that a bit in that a lot of the goals of theming is enabling individual installations to control the look and feel of the site without needing to, interface with, the Open edX development pretty much at all. But there might be other high priority extension points for you. So hearing back from you about that would be helpful in starting to address and work on those. And there might be additional open questions. There was one earlier in the remote meetup that I thought to myself, oh, I should add that to the slide, but then I didn't. So maybe I'll see if I can dig back in Slack to find it. But these are just generally things we're starting to think about. And hearing back from you about which of these are important to you and which of these we should focus on is helpful, so we can make the best use of our resources and energy. And
yeah, so
that is it for my presentation.
Yep, and there's a question in the Slack channel from if I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. It's Reggie, about different platforms having different requirements. Do you think that modularity of Open edX should be improved? I know definitely that's something the architecture group is thinking a lot about in terms of decoupling at least like the LMS and CMS, and then potentially further breaking down those pieces. And part of the effort that Ned talked about earlier in terms of being able to Dockerize the different services and have them talk to each other. I think they all kind of play into the quote unquote modularity in terms of both being able to go horizontally in terms of having services on different machines, and still be able to interact with each other in that fashion. But it's going to take a while. I mean, LMS and CMS are pretty big code bases with a lot of stuff intertwined and a lot of dependencies and a lot of dependents. So, but definitely there's an effort in terms of thinking toward that direction, and both in development and deployment.
Yeah, and to when we're working with the architecture team, when we're working with the product team, the best thing we can have to push for these kinds of things is, I guess, testimonials or examples from the open source community about how this would benefit you. So if you would like to see something happen, for instance, increasing the modularity of OpenEdX, articulating that and getting that to us so that we can turn around and say to internal people, like, this would really help this group for this reason, is very helpful.
Right, and as specific as possible. I know we're not expecting you to slice this thing up into pieces for us, although pull requests welcome. But if you could give us specific examples, like, I wanted to do this thing, but you've already made this decision and tied my hands, and if I only had a way to express that opinion somewhere, that's very helpful. One of the things that is difficult for us to do internally is to understand the diverse uses you guys are putting to the platform, right? So we've got a DevOps team, and they've got, they've chosen AWS and Ansible, whatever else they've chosen, and we have very good feedback from them about what they need from engineering in order to get that deployment done. And integrations and all sorts of other things. Whatever it is we're doing for edX.org, we have great feedback about that. The more information we can get from the community about the different way you're trying to use the platform that turns out to be difficult because we didn't anticipate that need, that helps feed back into the architecture and design that we can do to accommodate that possibility in the future.
And the thing that we don't do right now that both sides can contribute to is if we look at contributions as they come in and ask the question, could this have been?
Hello?
I think you cut out there, Joel. Whoops.
Well, hopefully we'll get Joel back.
Are you still there, Ned?
As a community, we can start thinking in those terms and start, calling those things out more as we see them.
Great. So we missed a little bit of that, Joel. But we're at 3:04, so I just want to respond to one of the other questions in the remote meetup channel, which is from Felipe, which is about whether it makes sense to come up with something similar to an OSPR, but at the product management level, or did I just get it and that's exactly the early involvement of edX in the significant contribution workflow? I think so that's part of what we're trying to get at with the workflow, is to get product involved early, get engineering involved early, so that when the OSPRs come down the line, people already know what the goals are and have already sort of committed to the importance of this being merged into the OpenEdX code base. It might be that this is does not actually fulfill that goal, at which point hopefully we can adjust the process to do that. But a big part of the process is definitely to get the sort of management or decision-making buy-in that these are changes we want to see merged, changes we are willing to put the effort into to review and to help plan. So yeah, so hopefully that'll work. But as I say countless times, please feel free to give feedback. Your complaints are always appreciated and never treated as a burden. I know that can be a bit of a social thing where you don't want to be seen as a squeaky wheel, but we want you to squeak.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just realize, like Ned was saying earlier, we're kind of the go-between for both internal and external, right? So at the same time we're working with you, we're also working internally to try to help edX people understand kind of what community contribution means and how to best handle that. So it's going to be a constantly evolving process, and we definitely welcome your feedback. Cool. Cool. So let's see. So we can wrap up. The next, like I said earlier, the next meetup is going to be kind of November, December, seeing that they're both kind of holiday months, especially here in
the fourth
US.
Thursday of the month next month is American Thanksgiving. So
right. And then December might be a short month for a lot of people. So we'll just have one on December 8th. Tentatively scheduled for 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern time, and we'll send out more information as it comes closer. And yeah, hopefully everyone had fun in this one and got lots of good information. And we look forward to the next one. And if you have anything specific that you want us to look into or provide more information, give us feedback through any of the normal channels, Slack, email, or Google Groups. Cool.
Any last questions? We have one person typing.
Yep.
Want to know what John is saying? Oh, thanks.
Thanks. Well, thank you. Yeah. And thanks to Robert and Pierre for sharing so much good information with us. And we'll see everyone next time.
See everyone next month.
Bye.